Do we have any teachers or former teachers in the audience? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, my wife and well, about a third of the audience. Okay, because teachers like to know, ask questions, and they like to know what their class, the composition of their class and stuff. So I'm going to ask a couple basic questions. How many of you were in the military? Raise your hand. Okay. World War II. It looks like we've got a good size from World War II. Okay. Korea. Okay. Vietnam. Oh, good. I see a first Cav patch back there. That was my first unit, and that's the unit that really brings back memories to me. Tears.
First Cav, but he was Air Force. What battalion?
11th Aviation Group. We had choppers for the whole unit. It was easier to get a chopper to go somewhere than it was to get a Jeep or a quarter-ton truck. How many present? Iraq, Desert Storm, Iraq, Afghanistan? What, one? Okay. You know, a lot of people have the misconception that in the military, everybody is up on the front lines firing weapons and stuff like that. Let me go through this real quickly. Grew up in Plymouth, Michigan. Anybody know where Plymouth is? Okay, that's down by Ann Arbor. Graduated from Western Michigan University in 62, January 63 actually. Went to the infantry school June to August of 63 at Fort Benning. 63 to 66, stationed in Kitzingen, Germany, 2nd Brigade, 3rd Infantry Division. And June 66, went to jungle school. That was a requirement before you went to Vietnam. Go down for 2 weeks at Fort Sherman. Camp Sherman had a jungle school down there. September 67 to August 68 was Vietnam. August.
No, you got home.
Okay, 66, 67, August 68, yeah, it was Vietnam, first Cav. Then advanced officer training, Fort Harrison, because I transferred from infantry to adjutant general. September 68, 70, stationed at Fort Sheridan, 70, 71. Went back to Vietnam because they said I didn't do a good job the first time over. No, they said you were infantry the first time, now you're adjutant, AG. And so I did my second term. Came back home, stationed at Fort Bliss, and then in 72, I was released from, they had a cutback, and I was released from, you know, one of the things, the military takes a lot of criticism from people who, well, they don't put round pegs in round holes and square pegs in square holes. They do the opposite. But in my case, I was a physical education major at Western Michigan College. I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be a coach. My dad died when I was 8 years old, and he was an athlete at Plymouth. He was a captain of the football team. And back in 1917, because he was 18, he got drafted out of high school. He was in the senior class at Plymouth, and because he was 18, they drafted him. He went to, you know, the internet is such a powerful tool. I have a friend, one of the members of Lest We Forget, that went in and pulled up all these pictures of him at training in San Diego, down in California in 1917 and 18. But apparently, the war ended before he got sent overseas, before he finished his training. So he came back to Plymouth and graduated from Plymouth. So anyways, I had that background that I always knew about. My dad died when I was 8 years old, and the football coaches were my surrogate fathers, you might say, because they just grew up. I grew up with them, and football and basketball and track were my loves, but football primarily. And I went to college to be a football coach. And so when I went into military, ROTC, Western Michigan had a requirement. You do 2 years of ROTC or 2 years of physical education. And because I was a PE major, I knew that I wasn't going to, I didn't need any more phys ed, so I went to ROTC to see what it was like. And then in 61, I got talked into signing up for the advanced course because the PMS called me in and said, "Are you interested? Why don't you sign up for the advanced course?" And I said, "I don't want to go in the military for 2 years. I want to coach." And he said, "Well, you can go in for 6 months." So I said, "Okay." So I signed up for the advanced course, and I was 6 months. Well, in October of 61, if you remember, President Kennedy got on the TV and said, the Bay of Pigs said that all 6-month programs were canceled. And that was when I learned that I was going to be in service for 2 years. And I went to Fort Benning, and I got orders for Germany. And I wanted to bring my wife along, my family. And they said, "Well, you can't do it on government shipping. You can do it if you extend for a year." So I said, "Okay, let's do that." And so I went over to Germany. I was in infantry. But the thing of it is, because of my background and because of my interest and stuff, I went into the 3rd Infantry Division as a A&R officer, athletic and recreation. I coached the division track team. I was the officer in charge of the division baseball team, coached the brigade basketball team, and coached the brigade football team, assistant coach brigade football team. And we traveled, back in the 60s, military, Army infantry divisions were traveling all over Europe to play the 24th and 3rd Armored and 4th Cav, 1st Cav. And it was really nice duty. And in December of 65, I sent in a letter to DA saying that I wanted to get out because I wanted to go back to civilian life. And at that time, that was the procedure. And up until then, well, I got a letter from the DA in January 67 66 saying that you submitted too soon, 90 days prior to your ETS, which was June ETS. So in March, I sent in a request, 90 days, and I get a reply right back real quickly. You can go to get released after you serve a year in Vietnam. So then I went to Vietnam, and because of my background, if they'd put me out with an infantry unit, it really would have been a mistake for the soldiers that had under me. I mean, I would have done it, but I didn't really have the background that a captain, because I was a captain at that time. But the thing of it is, I was assigned to the 1st Cav as a civic action officer, civil affairs, and that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. The rest of the presentation is that kind of duty. It's a different experience than most have, and it's a different slant at the war. But the thing is, my second time when I went over there, I branch transferred from infantry to AG, and I had to go over as an AG officer, and I was the special service, the chief of special actions, and we had emergency leaves under our auspice, and we had message center, top secret messages came in, and following this Hillary fiasco, I'll tell you what, I had one time where I lost a message. It was 100. My message sergeant came to me and said, "Sir, we got a problem." I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "We sent a top secret message to the Vietnam headquarters up in Da Nang, and they have not acknowledged receipt of it." And I said, we sent out 100, we had 150 that we had to account for. But that one, if that was lost, that could be my career. And I've known of several officers that, just a slip like that and end your career. And so I got on a plane, went up to Da Nang, went to the Vietnamese headquarters, and the G3, which is operations, I went to there, and there was a Vietnamese major, met me at the door, and I went in the office, and he said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "I'm looking for a top secret document that came to your office, and we never got a receipt for it." "Oh, I don't know what you're talking about." And I don't know why, but I opened a drawer that was right next to where I was standing. And there was a document there, top secret. And I said, that's it, give it to me, or sign this receipt. And, but you know, the experiences that I had as a AG officer, we had a special actions emergency leave. We had a policy that anybody that came in from the field, or anybody in the division, if they had a sickness, an illness to back home, we would get them out on 2 hours, less than 2 hours, take to process everything and get them out. And for every one person that's up on the front row lines, there's 6 to 8 that are back behind, bringing up fuel, food, all the different things that take place in order for the unit to function. So the military is just like a smooth machine. And that's what I'm going to talk about here. Transferred to medical branch and remained in the military for actually 30 years, total 94. Ran the medical clinics for 7 summers at Camp Greeley and Camp Ripley. Okay, this is my first CAV, Civic Action. This was the CAV was located at An Khie, and we had the biggest base camp of the military in Vietnam, 28 miles in circumference. Well, the month before I got there, there was a village that was located just inside the boundaries. And the U.S., we paid the villagers, we gave them some money that they could move to about a half-mile away outside of the camp. And this village chief here, I saw him just about every day. This was what they were living in before before we were when we got there. Before we arrived, it was and this is typical wheelbarrow, a wooden wheel and the basket there, and this was an area that was a building that wasn't being used, and we eventually turned it into a dispensary for the people. I'll talk about that. You see this infant here, kids were carrying their brothers and sisters around with them. It was always common to see things like this. But I would say 90% of the villagers and kids in the village had this impetigo, scalp disease. And what we did was we built a shower point. Now that shower point is a wooden stand with a 55-gallon drum up on top and the water coming down. So it was heated by the sun. It wasn't anything that was extra special. But if a kid had scalp disease, or if they had any cut, they could come in, and if they took a shower, we would give them a sucker or lollipop. I'll tell you what, those kids came in, the tiniest cut. Sometimes you couldn't even see it. I'd say, there's nothing there. Oh yeah. But I'll tell you, within 2 months, 3 months, I don't think there was a child in the village that had the impetigo or had serious infections that come from not being, the climate right now, that would have been in August and September of '66, and it's pretty warm. Now, next to the dispensary, we constructed a playground, and this is the swings, and we also, the engineers, post-engineers, built a, we don't know it. We had a volleyball net, we had a basketball court, and we had volleyball, basketball, slides. Oh, and we had that game where you try to wind the ball around the pole, and 2 guys are playing. Those things we're talking about people who had never had any experience with electricity or anything. They had no electricity. Everything was either generator or they didn't have the conveniences that we know about. But that playground was occupied from sunrise to sunset with things going on. And we also, the first cab, before I got there, taken up a collection, and they got $9,000. And that $9,000 bought a lot more than it does today, but it allowed them to construct a high school. The highest grade in the village up until, this is on K, and it's about 45 miles inland from Quinlan. Quinlan was a big city on the coast. But there was, 6th grade was as high as a kid could go in the village that we were in. So they plans on the high school. And the individual in the middle is Sergeant Rep. He was my interpreter. Tremendous guy. He could speak English just as fluently as an English person. And the interpreter is on, and the foreman, the architect, in charge of the project is on the right there. So I'm between the three of us. The two of us. Rep is translating things, and we're talking about plans for the building. And when I left, it was about well, that was as far as it was going. But I found out through the grapevine that it was finished. This was. You see the kids, you don't see any kids with infantile, and some of the clothing, American type clothing, had a project with Columbia, South Carolina called RSVP, Rally Support Vietnam Personnel. And this individual from John Wharton, who was retired Air Force, he sent Connex containers of clothing and games and books and everything, and so most of those clothing that they're wearing came from his donation. Right now we're looking up to see Santa Claus. We had Santa Claus come in on the helicopter here, the chopper. You can see him in the uniform. It's not a real good picture, but Santa is there. That building in the background is they had used it for something, but we were using it to house Chu Hoi. The Chu Hoi mountain yards were a native. They were like the Indians that we have now in our country. They were not part of the main population, and they really were not too well liked. But they brought these mountain yards in from the mountains, and they were living in there and getting helped out. Okay, there's Santa Claus. That was Lieutenant Holloway, and he was a pathfinder. But in the meantime, a lot of the troops would come out, in my unit, would come out and see the kids and stuff. And now we went to each house and passed out toothpaste and soap. And we would take and pass out 1 tube of toothpaste a month and 1 bar of soap every 2 weeks, because we found out that if we passed out more than that, they would put the excess on the black market and sell it. But they would keep and use the toothpaste and soap. So and that's one of the individuals or 2 of the individuals that received stuff. This is the Vietnamese pig. When you were over there, do you remember seeing?
Well, when you mentioned the soap, in 2nd 19th Artillery, we had a sick call program too. We used to cut bars of soap in half to discourage them.
Yeah.
On black market.
But this is the Vietnamese pig, and the Vietnamese pig had been inbred for centuries, and the meat was nothing but fat. I'll never forget, I was walking through the village one night, and the village chief saw me walking, and he came out on the porch and motioned me to come in. And he had, his living room was about 20 feet long and 10 feet wide, and concrete floor, and he had a rug, a couple blankets spread out, and they had food that they were going to be served. And he asked me to sit down and partake in the dinner. Well, I had been warned by my individual I replaced, try to stay away from the being invited to dinners, because it does not, their diet does not work too good with what you're used to in your system. You'll spend the next week or 2 with the heaves. Well, so anyways, I sat there, and they served me the very first morsel. And I picked it, they had toothpicks, and I picked it up, and I put it in my mouth, and there was candlelight was the only thing. It was dark, so I didn't really see the whole thing. But it was pure fat. And I came so close to regurgitating it, but I knew everybody, 20 people, 20 guys, the village elders, the head men of the village were, this was their dinner. And they were all looking at me, wanting to say, oh, this is great. And that's what I had to do, what I did. But anyways, so this was because the pigs had been inbred for centuries, the meat was very bad. What happened is I went to, the military had a program called USAID, United States Agricultural, I'm not sure what ID stood for, but it was to help the Vietnamese improve their agricultural delivery and stuff. And I went down to Saigon on a plane, on a caribou, on a military plane, and got 18 little piglets. Well, those are, they're about 2 or 3 months stage there. But I got a box of 18 piglets, and I brought it back on the plane. The pilot did not want to take them at first, American pilot, and I convinced him that they were part of a military mission, and that we needed to have it back. So we took them back, and the villagers built this concrete cement pig barn. And the villagers took care of the pigs. And they got to, when I left, we started out with 18. When I left 6 months after bringing the first 18, there were 140 pigs. They multiplied really, really fast. And it was now that was our civil affairs truck, and it was stuck a lot of times. And, it has the first cab 11th aviation on it, headquarters 22. At the end of the tour, of my tour, they had a ceremony out in the village, and there's people that came from the village, from the province headquarters at Quin Yan, and Sergeant Rep and myself, and Sergeant Rep's on the far right, Sergeant Fletcher is in the middle, and I'm on the left there. We got presented with a Vietnamese award that apparently was not issued very much at all. It was quite an honor. We had a lot of people there. So now, I wanted to talk about this picture, the next picture before I show it. All these things that we did, we had math class, we had Monday night out in the village, we had this little house that was not used. It was about 20 feet long and 10 feet wide, and we put in there about benches to see at least about 50 kids. And on Monday night we did English, and on Wednesday night we did math. We did English Monday night, math on Wednesday night, and then on Friday nights we would go out to the village, and we had a generator on our truck that we plugged in a 16 millimeter movie camera, and on that wall we showed, I remember the time we showed Days of Lightning drums. That was a John F. Kennedy documentary and stuff. It was a space shot. This was in 66. And the people they didn't know what they were looking at, but they clapped. And we showed a movie on guns. And even though they didn't understand English, when the good guys won, they were all clapping. It was really interesting. So, toward the end of my tour, I think it was in May, I was eating lunch, and our mess hall was a favorite one for news correspondents to use because the food was known to be quite good. And so I was eating lunch, and this individual sitting across the table from me was a photographer for one of the big, I think, Time. It was either Time or Newsweek, but Time, I think. And he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm like a Peace Corps. I'm out in a village that we sponsor from 9 in the morning until I was out there until 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night a lot of times." And I told him what we were doing. He said, I'd like to come out. He said, "I don't have to be inside. My plane doesn't leave till tomorrow morning. I don't have to be in Saigon for anything special. I'd like to come out and take a look at your village. And what you've done." I said, "Okay." So I took him out and walked around and showed him the piggery, showed him the playground, showed him the dispensary, showed him all these things, and he kept shaking. He said, "I can't believe this. This is great. This is tremendous. And finally I said to him, I said, why don't you take some pictures and send them back to your editor in New York? He shook his head, no. And then I said, well, why not? He said, because this is not the kind of pictures that they're looking for. And 3 weeks later, a month later, this picture appeared in his magazine on the front cover. This is a American soldier setting fire to a hut. And this was it was either Time or Newsweek, June of 67, June of 67. But, he said to me, he said, I can't believe you've done this. This is fantastic. This is tremendous. And then he says, well, my editors won't take anything like this. So that is my story of the year in Vietnam. I went back the second time because I branch transferred, and I was an AG officer. I had the publications, I had orders, we had admin services for the Americal division. And when I got there, I asked the guy I was replacing, he was leaving, he gave me a quick tour of the office and things, and I said there was a door next to his, these were huts, not really huts, but very poorly constructed buildings. And he had this little door next to my desk, the desk that I was going to take. It had a little padlock on it, and I said, "What's on that? What's in this room?" And he said, "Those you don't want to." This was in January. You don't want to do anything. You don't want to bother with those because they are the records of My Lai. And for the next 6 weeks, about once a week, I had individuals coming from Hawaii, from Saigon, and even the United States, Washington, D.C., to look at the records. Because every unit in the military is required to keep a diary, a daily log. And there was a sergeant major, head sergeant major in Vietnam came one time, and he was looking, and they were looking to see if there was anything in there that was bad for them, basically. Well, then finally in February, the Pierce Commission was formed, and I'll never forget the picture in the Sergeant Strikes of the two individuals. I think they were two sergeants getting off the plane in D.C. carrying the records. And those things, because I got to thinking that door was just secured by a bicycle paddle lock that could have been knocked off really easy. If I came in there one day and found that the records had been taken, or something that had broken into, that would be another thing that would be a career-ending episode. But there was that. There was a couple other interesting experiences that. The internet. Now this is the back to my civil affairs. We had this individual from South Carolina, John Morton, that sent these Conex containers. At Christmas time, he sent so much stuff that we did not have. We had too much to pass out to the villagers. So my interpreter, Sergeant Rep, said, "Why don't we take this stuff over to?" It was dolls and jump ropes for the girls, and basketball, and some other stuff for the guys, yo-yos. And he said, "Why don't we take this to the leprosarium in Quin Yon? They could welcome these." So we loaded the things on a plane and went to the leprosarium. No, we drove with our pickup, and because we had too many boxes to put on a plane. We drove with our pickup about 45 miles to Quin Yon, and it was the fabulous, best place, most cleanest place I've ever seen in my life. It was marble, buildings were all marble. It was run by some Catholic nuns from France, and in that time in Vietnam, if one member of the family got leprosy, the whole family went into the compound. And I don't know where I don't think that's true now. But anyways, and so they had this little, it was run by the Catholic nuns, and my interpreter. So we left we gave them the presents and stuff, and they had a little dinner for us. And I later found out in '72 that the VC ransacked the compound, burned the whole place, and killed the nuns. So anyways, so Sergeant Rep and I decided that we didn't want to take the truck ride back to Ankei, because we had Sergeant Fletcher could drive the truck back. We were going to take the plane, and there was a air base landing strip, LZ English. Do you ever remember LZ English?
Yeah, I was on LZ English for about 10 months, and our sick call ran up there.
Well, we went over to LZ English, and in January 1st, the Air Force took over the Caribou. Up until January 67, the Army had been flying the Caribou. The Caribou was a little short plane, big tail, and it was designed to go into bases where Special Forces operated stuff. It could either land in 700 feet and take off in 1,000, or take off in 700 feet and land in 1,000. I'm not sure which, but
land in 700, take off, and on.
Yeah. Okay. Are you familiar with the Caribou?
No, but I'm familiar with airplanes. It takes longer to take off than it does to land.
Okay, then yeah, I'll remember that now. So, anyways, the loadmaster, the guy at the gate, the Air Force, I said, "Is there a plane going back to Ankei?" He said, "Yeah, you can run and catch. If you can run and catch that plane, it's taxiing out." So it was going real slow. Sergeant Rep and I went out there, and the tailgate was still down, so we jumped up on it, and there's 24 seats in that Caribou, and there were about 8, as I recall, there were 8 that were occupied, and so I went to this seat, passenger seat, and because there's a window here, and I started to pull the seat belt down from the ceiling, from the above, and I heard this voice say to me, "Don't sit there." And I looked around, and the crew chief, none of the crew had said, "Don't sit there," and none of the passengers had said, "Don't sit there." So I started buckling up again, and it said a second time, "Do not sit there." So I said, "Okay." So I got up and went across the aisle. The plane had taken off, and all of a sudden there was a noise in the cabin, a sound, and we looked up, and in the center of the plane, the aisle of the plane, up above, is a line, hydraulic line that controls the brakes, the steering, the rudder, the aileron. Everything hydraulic with the plane is controlled by that little hydraulic, and red liquid was running out. And we yelled, and the crew chief came back, took a look at it, went back up there, and started pumping away. And I hadn't noticed, but the plane had made a return to the airstrip. And when I saw out the window, all I saw was a rice paddy, and I thought, my life actually went from, you've heard that saying, but I actually did. It honestly, in 2 or 3 seconds, I had a life view. Anyways, we hit, we bounced, and we bounced, and we bounced, and finally we stopped, and we got out of the plane, and the pilot was an Air Force major, and he was shaking. He said, "That's the worst landing I've ever had to make." He said, "We did not have a single drop of hydraulic fluid left." And that village, the village was right next to the airstrip, there'd been an individual, so I got on the plane, back on the plane, and I walked down, and I went to the seat that I originally sat in, and that middle of that seat, that shell had gone up through the middle of the seat, up to the line in the middle of the plane. If I hadn't heard that voice, I wouldn't be here today. And I know where the voice came from. It honestly to God, it's the only time I've ever had that experience with that. But it was, so I got back out of the plane, we got back, and we stayed there overnight. And one of the American officers that was in charge of LZ English said that this guy had been shooting a 50 caliber, well, they're the 51 caliber machine gun. So during the night, because the villagers wouldn't turn them in, the village was leveled basically. But so, anyways, but that was an experience that I didn't tell my wife. Just my wife Sharon over here. If this presentation wouldn't have been possible tonight without her assistance, because we were very frustrated here this last couple of days. I'm not, when it comes to technology, I'm back in the 18th century because I'm not on Facebook, I'm not on LinkedIn, I'm not on anything. And so, anyways, but that was the Vietnam trip. I think that's the end of the